everyone. So we're here with Dorth. He's a former USF as a sport management student and now an alumni, of course, some time ago since he started. We're part of the program. But first of all, Dorth, thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. And I think we're just going to dive right into the questions. So as you know, a lot of our readers and viewers, they're kind of like young and trying to find their career path. And I think a lot of the key questions that we want to highlight is if you can share a little bit about your academic and professional experience with us so they can get a little bit more insight about who are you, where you at, and what have you done.
Absolutely. So I knew I wanted to work in sports from my undergraduate experience. So I went to UC Santa Cruz, which was a Division III school, and very underfunded at the time. And so I got to as much time as I was willing to put in. I could, it was like the athletic director and me pretty much. And I became the recruiting coordinator. I became the sports information director, and I became the assistant women's basketball coach. So like as much as I was willing to put in, like they were giving me opportunities, and I was working as a full-time student, like 60 hours a week. And so I think that just, and not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. And I think that just speaks to, taking advantage of the opportunities in front of you. So even though this athletic department didn't have a lot of money, like I made myself so sort of indispensable that they found enough money to hire me to a full-time role the year after I graduated. And I joke about it, but it was like the best job I ever had. But it could have been because I was working like 70 to 80 hours a week. And I was making like I was making $13,000 for the entire year. So like, I don't even want to figure out like what the per hour rate was, but I didn't care. And I probably liked it more from like a heuristic standpoint because I was working so much. Like I had to explain to myself why I was doing this. So it's like, I must love it so much. But anyway, from there, the athletic director had connections at Stanford Athletics because he worked with those athletic directors at the World Cup in '94 and the Olympics in '96. And so he hooked me up there, went to go work at Stanford Athletics in the operations department. And, putting on events, setting up events, taking down events, again, crazy hours, lots of hours. And from there, when I was there, I noticed a position opened up for like managing editor / sort of web architect role for their GoStanford.com website. And I was doing like operations role, like setting up bleachers and barricades and all that kind of stuff, like physical work at events. And no one knew that like I did the website at my previous at UC Santa Cruz and these technical. No one just knew because I was doing other things. And so I applied, and they were like, "Oh, we didn't know you knew." I ended up getting hired, and so that was great. Did that for 3 years, and then they actually, so I worked with a company called CSTV, which later was bought by CBS Interactive. They basically, they did websites for athletic departments. So they were our vendor. And so at some point, Stanford decided, you know what, we have a person dedicated to the role here, but we don't have to. And so they actually they eliminated my role. They felt bad, so for the next 10 months, I actually worked on a different project with them, and that was the Sports Law Conference. So with Jamie Zaninovich, who is the assistant athletic director at the time, and he partnered with the law school, so we did a sports law conference. Had the best and the biggest names in the industry come to that, and that was a success. And then after that, I went traveling because that was like a project role. I went back to South Africa for 6 months, and then I came back and started looking for a job in sports. And even though I'd had these great experiences, I actually did have a hard time finding a role, and I spent a while applying, and it didn't go super smoothly as I wanted. It was ironic because like I was, probably it was like a 6 to 7 month process of like applying for jobs, interviewing. And the irony is that, I didn't get many offers. I didn't get any offers. And then at the very end, I literally got 2 offers within an hour of each other. So it was really a weird universe thing. It was like for 6-7 months, I don't get any offers, and then I get 2 offers within an hour.
It's usually how it happens, right?
So the universe is very strange. And so the 2 offers were very different. One was to go work for CSTV. So I'd been on the client side, and now, because they knew me from that experience, we had a good relationship, they were going to hire me, and I was going to go work in San Diego and Carlsbad at their headquarters. Right. That was option 1. And then option 2 was to go work at Clemson University in South Carolina, as in their sort of compliance office. I'd gone there for an interview, and so that was South Carolina and Clemson, very different experience than California, conservative state. It was a hard decision, but I ended up taking the the CSTV job in San Diego, and did that for a couple of years, and then I got recruited to go work the Winter Olympics at Yahoo Sports. So this was 2006. And the crazy thing about this part of the story is that they found me on Monster.com. The reason they found me is like there was some promotion that they sent me in the email saying like, update your resume for a chance to win $1 million. I literally, like, the only reason years. So it's one of those really weird stories. And what made it even stranger was that, so they called me, they wanted to set up an interview, and I was visiting a friend in New York, and unlike me, but very unprofessional, I just forgot about the interview. And so all of a sudden they call me, I'm literally on the city streets of New York. I'm like, oh my God, I have to do this interview and with my friend, who she was very understanding. But I literally, like, jumped into a store, and it happened to be like a Ben and Jerry's store. I'm, like, in the corner trying to like cup, because they had like weird, strange, like ice cream parlor music going on. Have this conversation, have this interview in the store. I'm kind of like trying to, be as composed as possible. It went on for like 40 minutes. I was like, okay. And I literally thought, if I get this job, like, there's no way I'm getting this job. It was such a great experience. But I did get the job, and that was great. And so then I moved from working CCTV to Yahoo Sports, Winter Olympics. And then right after that, they needed sports producers for the front page of Yahoo.com. Right. And so I did that, and that turned into a full-time role, and I was in there for 6 years. Nice. And that was a great experience, but it was, I got promoted once, but I felt very sort of stuck because no one was leaving. They weren't like growth opportunities. So I felt pretty stuck. And that's when I got recruited to go work at Bleacher Report as director of distribution and programming. And then from there, I was there 5 years, and each year after that, I got more responsibilities, analytics, quality control, and then eventually they groomed me to become the GM/CEO. And so I was in that role for 2 years until one of the founders decided he wanted to come back, so that made sense for me to leave at that point. So that was sort of like the extent of my sort of sports media career. When I left Bleacher Report, because I was still under contract, I couldn't work in sports. Like, there was a non-compete. That was that was frustrating, but I couldn't work in sports, and so that meant so I went to work at fandom.com, which used to be called Wikia, and this was an entertainment site. So TV, movies, video games, comics, books, huge community site. It's like it's the commercial. So that was that experience. Did that for 2 years. Then we were acquired, and then went to work at Gardner in Austin, Texas. That's a B2B company. But all this time, I was also doing, I was advising startups like Mars Reel and Uninterrupted and all these other sort of sports startups. I was sort of advising on the side, just because I really enjoy mentoring startups. But yeah, that was kind of that's been my career path. Back Boston. I'm actually probably in the same role as some of the people watching this video right now. Like I am in the sort of looking for my next role phase. So I'm doing a bunch of interviews, reaching out to a bunch of people. And so, that's kind of where I am right now.
No, but it's a really fascinating story, and you talk a lot about like how things, changes so fast and rapidly, and I think there's a lot of depth and knowledge for like the young audience to like take from here. First of all, I think it's like you need the passion, for the industry for sure. Talking about like the early days and like just being willing to put down the hours, and you don't really think about it because you just follow your passion and you have a lot of fun, but also taking advantage of that opportunity for sure. And we didn't talk that much about it, but obviously you're USF Sport Management alumni. So can you talk a little bit about that experience and how the program elevated your professional career?
Totally. Now, this is a super interesting part as well, because I was working at Stanford Athletics when I was going to the USF program. So every Tuesday I would drive there for the 4-hour class from Palo Alto, and it was a great experience. There was some hard things about it because I had a full-time role, which I was super happy about. I couldn't do the internships the way like some people could, so there wasn't like sort of opportunity to explore other areas as much. But I was super happy to have a full-time role and a full-time salary and benefits. So there was that aspect. It's one of those things where the program, because it's a master's program, because it's a private school, it's not an inexpensive program, right? It's pretty expensive. And you're always thinking like, is this worth it? Am I gonna is it gonna pay for itself? And the honest truth is, like, I really believe it has, but I couldn't measure it, right? Like, like every job I apply for now and have applied through my career, like I have a master's degree, and that puts me in front of a lot of other people who don't. And it's hard to really know that. But I think what it tells people is that this person is, if you have a master's degree, you've taken that next level and you're really serious about, and you've put in that commitment. And so I think it puts you in front, it either puts you in front of the line, or if there's two candidates that are equal, it may give you a bump. So it's super hard to measure because no one says like, no one tells you that your degree was an important part of it. But you kind of, so it takes you a while to figure out, I think this really has helped. But you kind of have to just kind of trust it because there's no like direct back.
No, but no, I think that's a really valid point. And for me, obviously, in my experience, I think what I enjoyed the most about the program itself was just kind of like what you talked about as well, is that you had a full-time job on the side, right? Of course, you didn't have the chance to explore as much because of it, but at least you had the opportunity to, have that, full-time job or exploring different opportunities while doing the program, which I think was a huge advantage, because in a lot of other places you have to, be on the school bench every day, and you might not have the same opportunities to explore on the side as much as you would like. So I think for me personally, I think that was like one of the reasons why I chose the program, and was a huge learning experience for me at least. And I think that's a huge benchmark to talk about like the experience side of like getting your foot in, essentially.
Totally. And there's one other part that I forgot to talk about, and that was like, throughout the program, I wasn't sure like what my end project was going to be. I really got lucky because I literally had this like light bulb moment. I'm like, oh my God, this is exactly what I want to do. And like, I was super excited about it. And it literally was like, oh my God, I want to do that. And what I did was, there was this, because at this point I was still at Stanford Athletics, I thought I still wanted to be an athletic director. Roles within athletic departments called SWA, Senior Women Administrators. And they were created to make sure women sports is well represented. It was also created to make sure you had having women in athletic departments. And so what I wanted to explore was like the creation of these SWA roles, was this giving women an opportunity to become athletic directors, or was it sort of like, did it create like a sort of a glass ceiling? Like they were going to put in these roles and then that's kind of as high as they could go. And so I had this idea, I had this like thesis question. And the great thing was I was at Stanford Athletics, where like they win the Sears Cup every year. Like they're one of the most sort of renowned athletic departments. And I got Debbie Gorman, who was the SWA at Stanford, and Ted Sealand, who was the athletic director at Stanford. I got them each to send out a survey to their other people within the athletic, within all the NCAA. So we sent it to like literally like 2,000 ADs and 2,000 SWAs. Wow. It came from their email, and so we got something like an insane like 70% like completion rate on the survey.
Oh, that's crazy.
So it was super. The data was super interesting, and then I actually got to present it to like the SWA National Conference. So I went there and presented to these like all these women and stuff. So it was super interesting. I definitely used, that's still on my resume today. That
for sure.
My paper was published. I presented at this conference, and so definitely something I'm super proud of. And that definitely came out of the program, obviously.
No, for sure. And I think that's a really valid point. And again, like thinking about like Sporting Global came out of that too. So just as a bright idea, and here we are, right? So there's a lot of stuff, and I think I always try to say to people that I also had a very like strict like, okay, I'm gonna like be this and like this is what I'm aiming for, but you gotta kind of like have your mindset open too, because you never know where your path is gonna lead you, and I think you always gotta. Even if you somehow know like where you want to go, like just have that openness, to like new opportunities, new elements of what might could happen, because you don't know where your passion or where you might, go from that point. I think one element I wanted to touch upon, and obviously kind of like gonna merge these questions a little bit together, but you obviously had like a little bit like vast experience from fandom, Bleacher Report. What are kind of the lessons you learned about the digital arena in the sport entertainment industry, and what do you see as the future trends in the media space?
Wow, that's a big one. At Bleacher Report, it was started by 4 people not in the media industry. So because of that, they did things differently. They didn't, it was much more data driven. There wasn't like a managing editor that was saying, we need to do all these stories. It was like, well, what do users want? And so I think the things I learned by having both traditional media experience and then having this experience that was sort of like a disruptive experience, right? Like Bleacher Report was a disruptor in that space. Just kind of made you realize that like, the power of kind of thinking about things differently and like going against kind of the grain of what everyone's doing. Like one example was, in 2010, we were linking out to other publishers because we had a curated stream experience, right? So if you were a Liverpool fan, you would get all the best stories from Liverpool. A lot of them we wouldn't. Only about a third of them were Bleacher Report stories, but we linked to other people. And at the time, it was like people didn't understand why we'd be sending people away. Like, it just kind of blew people's mind. Like, what are you getting out of it? And for us, we were building trust with users, and we wanted to be the starting point of sports, the Google for sports. And so, if someone having to go to 5 publications, they could just come to the Bleacher Report app, and then they would find everything they needed there. So I think being open to doing things differently. I was actually just speaking to a yesterday. Are they looking for someone who's been like professional teams their whole career and have kind of come up that route? And she's like, we went that route at the beginning, but we weren't finding people who were like thinking differently enough. And so we've actually now started to look at people who are not coming from sports or sports fans, but they've come from other industries where they kind of see marketing and they see how to promote sports in a different way. So it's sort of interesting. It's sometimes if you want to get to a certain destination, it's not always a straight line to that.
Yeah, for sure.
Sometimes it's like actually valuable to go in a different direction because that gives you experiences that give you an edge versus people who have like just gone like been promoted up through professional sports.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. So what do you see as the future trends though in the media space of the sport industry? Where will like companies like Bleacher Report and other media sport media like companies go from here?
Yeah, no, I think so. We're all competing against each other, and I don't just mean other media companies. I mean like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon,
Right.
Apple TV Plus, Disney Plus. Like ultimately, I think what people realize is that you're not competing against people in your vertical. You're competing
Right.
for attention span, and people only have a certain number of time in the day. They only are going to spend so much money on services, subscription
Right.
services, and so I think what people realize is you're competing against everyone. I think
Right.
that's the big thing. And like, how are you differentiated from what are you going to offer that's a must buy
Right.
versus everyone else? And so when you think about the media landscape right now, I think Bleacher Report is probably kind of the most. They've cornered the market. I think, well, they're best in breed for like being on social. Like they have House of Highlights. They have insane
Right.
engagement on all their social platforms.
Yeah.
I would say like The Athletic has done a great job of like, for that people who want like long form sports journalism at the
Yeah.
team level, like they've figured that out. Hopefully, like
Right.
the business model works long term.
Yeah.
That's what they figured out. Ironically, like Bleacher Report and ESPN both try to do that team thing, and they
Yeah.
couldn't kind of crack the code on it.
Interesting.
But the Athletic has kind of figured out that, and they figured it out by just hiring celebrity talent, right? Like people
Right.
have to follow. And then I would put NBC Sports in that sort of like they have the Olympics and they have like these big
Yeah.
events that like people
Yeah.
care about, but they are and they have soccer, but they are sort of more that sort of mainstream big events. Uh,
Right.
but like, I don't have a good sense of like Fox Sports um, or CBS Sports, like how they
Yeah. Yeah.
differentiate themselves.
Yeah.
ESPN, I think people still probably go to them the most for just um, they have probably the best stats and like ability
Right.
box
Right.
scores, and they have a lot of clips from TV. So it's trying to figure out like what are you going to be great at,
Right.
and where's the sort of white space in the market.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think also like we're, not only in sports media or in that sense, I think you will see more and more niche specific, again, alignments and companies that are focusing on their niche, right? And I think a lot of the reason for that is actually you talked a lot about time span, right? And people's attention level, and there's so much going on. So people want to, use their time on what they think is interesting for them and what they enjoy and like. And I think you will see a lot of those changes, of course, in the next few years of like how you tailor make even more specific. So the content or the specific content that you see is more and more relevant for you, because there's so much out there.
Totally.
I think.
Like I have a question for you. Like, how many apps do you use on a weekly or monthly basis? Roughly?
Yeah, like probably like max 10 or something.
It's interesting, yeah, because I probably like if I go through and like close all my apps, I'm probably at like over 100. And
Right.
so I think, and this is maybe just like my own personal bias because of my user experience, that like
Yeah.
people don't necessarily want everything in one app, right? Like
Right.
they like the idea of getting variety. They like the idea of
Yeah.
bouncing around. And so
Yeah.
it goes to what you were talking about, the niche. Like, I think it's far better to be great at one thing than to be like
Yeah.
at a lot of things. And so
Right.
figuring out what the company's niche and what they're going to be known for.
Right.
But that's the same for people. Like, what are you going to be an expert at? Um,
Right.
because if you're just like a jack of all trades, master of none, like that is a harder career.
Yeah.
It's harder to stand out that way.
No, for sure. And I think that leads me to my next question. And that is, what type of skill set would you need if you want to be a sports media expert in the next few years?
I think you have to be a consumer of it. Like, I mean, that seems like an obvious thing, but like,
Yeah.
you have to be a user, and you have to be able to empathize with the user. And it's a lot easier
Right.
to empathize with the user when you can be like, well, this is what I would like.
Right.
I can't remember where I saw this quote yesterday or the day before. It's probably on LinkedIn, but it was basically, I'll kind of mess up the quote, but it basically was saying like, you shouldn't try and create content and experiences for a user. You should create those things that you like. And that naturally, like, your opinion is not unique. And so if you create things that you like, other people will like it too. Just trying to create something for someone out there that it's like, so I think it's about making things personal, like create things you like and other people will like it as well, versus trying to create something for someone else. So there's that authenticity, the empathy, and then I think also just at like an internal level, you have to be able to like be a people person, because if you're going to be an executive, you're going to have you're going to have a lot of people to oversee. And you have to be able to have empathy for the people you're managing and be partnering with them. And the other thing is, it's such a small world. Like literally, there have been two cases in my career where I reported to someone like else. They were my boss, and then in another job, I was their boss. So you just have to treat people the way you want to be treated, because you never know. Like, you may be in a power dynamic over someone, but you never know. Like, that person may be your boss at a later point, and so you just treating people the way you would want to be treated. It sounds simple, but it's like those things are super valuable.
Yeah, and I think, again, goes back to understanding your market, understanding your skill set, and again, bring value wherever you can in a very specific way. But of course, also, treating people as you would be treated yourself. I think that's a very key lessons, and I think it talks a lot about people's personality, right, and people's values, what they believe in. And I think one of the key things we'll see moving forward as well in recruitment is how are you finding people that align with your company values and what you believe in, because it's not just about your background, right? It's about finding the person that are most suitable for that company and what they are looking for, not only from a skills perspective, but from values, personality, and where they can bring, the most value.
Totally. Absolutely.
So, I think we talked a lot about different kind of things here, and I wanted to like wrap it up with just diving into a little bit. What tips do you have for students? Kind of like the young professional, maybe like an undergrad student, maybe a graduate student that are, barely scratching their surface yet, and trying to get their foot in the door. It's a very competitive industry. There's a lot of people passionate about it and want to be part of it. If you can like wrap up like a few tips of like how are they going to get their foot in the door, I think that would be mostly appreciated.
Totally. Yeah, and I think you have to be willing to work harder than everyone else, or at least have that mindset, right? Like, you're willing to do anything. Like, the idea of like failure is not an option. Like, you will, like, you are relentless. And then so you have to have that work ethic. I think you have to have a curiosity. Like, you have to be super interested in how things work and ask people questions, and always, whatever job you're in, even if it feels like a very entry level, kind of low level grunt work job, like, you can learn so much from all the people around.
For sure.
People called redcoats who were like basically our ushers, and they were basically retired people who just liked going to sporting events and wanted to be around people. And like, these people had full careers, and like talking to them and like picking their brain on things and they love to talk about it because they're like older people, retired, like they're getting a sense of like value from sharing their wisdom. But I
Yeah.
would say like relentless work ethic, a curiosity about life and everything and people,
Right.
and then just like taking advantage of opportunities that present themselves. Like the
For
universe
sure.
is going to present opportunities to you, and I think, you know, I was in a position, I kind of said yes, I said yes to life, yes to everything
Right.
that came in front of me, which is both good and bad, because sometimes you get off
Right.
track, right? Like I'm not an
Yeah.
athletic director. At some point I realized like actually maybe that wasn't for me, but
Yeah.
so kind of took myself off that path. And so figuring out which things to say yes to and which things
Yeah.
to say no to
Right.
is a skill set, one that I'm not super good at. I said yes to pretty much like every opportunity that came in front of me, because that was like my motto.
Yeah.
Yes to life, but it also got me to some super interesting jobs and opportunities. So those are kind of the three things I would say: like relentless work ethic, a curiosity, and just being open and yet saying yes to the world.
I think it's really good advice, and I think you know, it is really key, you know, for the younger people here, especially in the competitive landscape that we're in, is that you know, it's a very attractive industry, and I think the passion has to be there, and you have to be willing to put down the work, and of course, you know, be open for the opportunities that are there, because you never know where it's going to lead you, and I think. You know, both of us, of course, you have way more experience than me, but I always talk about like I never thought myself starting a company, right? I always had like my plan, but I at the same time when the opportunity came up and like the idea came to life, I said like, you know, why not go for it and try, and then we'll see. At least I will learn from it, and then we'll go from there. And I think that's a very key lessons, is that for sure what you talk about, like hard work, commitment, and be open for sure. So with that, I think we're just gonna, you know, wrap up. It's been a long and good talk with a lot of interesting topics, and I think, and I truly believe that our audience will appreciate it. So with that, Dorth, I would like to thank you for the time, and we always finish with "Vi snakkes," which means see you later in Norwegian.
See you later. That was great. I love it. Well, have a good one. It was really great chatting with you.